Yesterday evening, a 20-year-old mother was shot in the back of the head by a gunman in Manhattan's Upper East Side while pushing her 3-month-old baby in a stroller. Authorities say the suspect is still on the loose. The shooter was said to be wearing all black with a hooded sweatshirt. New York City Mayor Eric Adams tweeted, "More guns in our city means more lives lost. It means more babies crying as those who love them lie dead. We cannot allow this epidemic to keep claiming lives."
Earlier in the day, another gunman in all black was seen shooting from a scooter in broad daylight in the Bronx. No injuries reported there. However, it is not all gun violence plaguing the city. Here's a video for a wanted homicide of two young men in all, suspects wanted for homicide, two young men in all black punching a 61-year-old man in the face, causing him to fall unconscious. And then they take his wallet, as you can see there, which is just horrifying. And there's been, a lot of other videos from, I've seen them from New York, but there's ones from all sorts of places. Philadelphia's crime is way, way up, for instance, but videos of, shovings and stabbings and beatings and all sorts of horrors, which it's always important to check against, the crime statistics. From perusing, what the crime statistics show right now is that actually, it doesn't look like crime in New York is up that much, violent crime. But like I just said, it is up in Philadelphia. It's up in Baltimore. It's up in some cities. Some cities it's up a little bit. Some cities it's way up. And then, but anyway, just a horrifying kind of thing to happen. The woman with the baby stroller sounds maybe possibly premeditated or planned, or like it's going to be a suspect who knows her, because at close range like that's not a random shooting. Usually that's someone trying to murder her.
Yeah, and ABC News was reporting that the killing appears to be targeted, but a motive is as yet unknown, and they're looking into her life and her relationships to see if there's anything there. And I think you make a good point, Robby, that, when we're talking about crime, it's important to talk about what's happening on a local level, because so often, there are political motives to spinning the narrative one way or the other. And just because it's up in one city doesn't mean that there's a relationship to what's happening in another city. There are people who would politicize this in a different direction and say that this is about perhaps the recent Supreme Court case overturning a New York law, but I'm not sure that, open carry laws have any relevance to this kind of what appears to be a targeted shooting,
Right.
And so
for all we know, this person has a gun illegally or illicitly, right? That could very well be the case. And it
wasn't necessarily open carry, right. So sometimes terrible things happen.
Yeah.
And it's not part of a bigger trend or anything like that. And it's also important to the extent that people want to talk about how to prevent things like this going forward, that we talk about prevention in ways that is targeted to the kinds of crimes that are actually taking place, right? And I think this is something that I think leftists and people who are particularly focused on the Second Amendment should be of one mind about. There's no point in offering some kind of sweeping reform, whether it's ramping up cops or pulling guns off the street, if it isn't targeted to the kinds of crimes that people are intending to dissuade people from perpetrating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's horrifying, and we can't stop as a society, all horrifying things from happening, and we should explore, whatever solutions are on the table. But I agree with you that, right, some on the left are going to say, well, this shows how we need to get more guns off the street. But okay, but then you need more police to take the guns away, or you need to lock people up for longer, do all sorts of things that those things are not politically appetizing to the left. And then it's the same in the other direction for conservatives saying, I want more law and order, more locking people away. We're like, okay, well then, but you're saying people shouldn't be allowed to have guns if they've had some conviction because sometimes you can't have a gun if you have a conviction for a nonviolent offense and that sort of thing, and one conservative be against that. So anyway, there's a lot of hypocrisy on these kinds of issues. Yeah. But I do take seriously the perception that crime is rising and that people feel unsafe. That perception does not always match reality, but it does in some places match reality. Some things are getting worse in some places some of the time. It's not everywhere. It's not universal, but it is I think more. There's some evidence of just more antisocial behavior, which isn't the kind of that's a murder with the woman with the baby. But the people, beating a man on the street, or shoving people, or getting into fights in public, or waving guns or shooting guns, kind of inadvertently shooting people. That kind of stuff does seem to be getting worse. I think maybe part of the pandemic, although then some people have arguments that other countries are not ailing or reeling from this, even though we all suffered the pandemic. So I don't know.
And part of it is we got to be open about the fact that it's a coverage issue. I mean, there are dozens of things, many crimes, many non-crimes, relevant newsworthy events happening every day. And, we do choose, the media as a whole chooses to cover these kinds of things. And that's not going to have a zero effect on the perception of people's public safety. The neighborhood where the shooting happened, where the young mother was shot, is actually a block away from where my mother used to live when I went to college. She moved up there. And it used to be many, many years ago. Obviously, I went to college like 20 years ago. But it used to be, it was always it's a good neighborhood, but it was kind of on the border of where the city was gentrifying, and the Upper East Side was melding into Harlem. But nowadays it's like all the check cashing places are gone, and it's all Blink gyms and a very Tony neighborhood. So this isn't the idea that I think that events like this happening in places that are perceived as being very safe does startle people. At the same time, the fact that this is what appears to be a targeted killing is notable. And again, is why I'm hesitant to put it into any broader trends. It's worth observing that 40% of women that are killed by intimate partners. Again, we don't know what happened here, but that is not exactly the same kind of event that is connected to people's generalized fear that something could happen to them.
And that would obviously be the educated person's guess for what was going on here, because as you said, domestic violence is so often, workplace violence actually is so often a cause of murder in general. Since it's not connected to ideological motivation, it is actually under discussed, and people overestimate how much ideological, political violence there is in the country, because that actually gets covered more. But so often people kill each other because they get into a fight because they're mad, because their air conditioning's broken, because their boss was a jerk, because that for those mundane in some sense is a driver of crime in a way people don't quite understand. But I agree with you on the when crime, and that's kind of disgusting on its own. We don't, as long as crime's happening in crime-ridden areas, that's the way it's supposed to be. But when
a lot of people don't care.
Gentrifying areas, how horrifying! In DC, we've had carjackings and some dog nappings in in areas of the city that are perfectly gentrified, and that has everybody on edge. But go across the river where there's the sort of horrible crime, and people just kind of expect that, which I've always found gross. And we should not just care if it's happening if it's happening in our faces.
Absolutely. Well, Team Rising joins us next. Please stick around.